Chapter 16. A Surprise, an Answer, an End. There was not much left to do but collect the wreckage of the one-man personal helicopter and take it to the professor's lab. Then the professor and the Templeton twins, and C, the RD, got into the professor's car, which had been left at Tick-Tock Tech when Dean D. Dean had shown up to take the professor to their conference in the woods, and drove home. On the way, they were somewhat somber. Yes, they were safe, and it was unlikely they would ever be bothered by Dean D. Dean or his brother, but the prospect of going home reminded them of the terrible fate of Nanny Nan. The excitement and relief and satisfaction of having outwitted the Dean twins had been soon replaced by a brooding silence. When they turned the corner onto their street, Abigail said, "Look, that's funny." There was a police car in front of the house, and it was funny, meaning strange, not amusing, because no one, not even Nanny Nan when she made her phone call before Dean D. Dean tried to shoot her, had called the police. "Someone must have heard the gunshot and called them," John said, as they climbed the porch steps. "Yes," their father agreed, reaching for his keys, "but too late to save poor Nanny Nan." At that, the front door flew open, and a tall, thin figure in gray pants and a gray shirt and a black baseball cap said, "So, there you are. Well, good. The children look safe and sound, and that's what's important. But I must say I don't care for the way I've been treated today. Left unconscious for hours. Did it not occur to any of you to phone the police? Must I do everything myself?" Professor Templeton's eyes lit up with relief. "Miss Noonan, I mean to say, you're alive." "No thanks to any of you, I may say," said Nanny Nan, for it was indeed she, as she turned and called into the house. "Yes, Officer Timmons, it's the professor and the twins." A tired-looking policeman in uniform appeared. He smiled, shrugged, and said, "Folks, and that was all he managed to get out. "It is absolutely beyond me that no one bothered to check on my condition. I lay on that kitchen floor for 4 hours. "We were kidnapped," Abigail said. "Plus, we thought you were dead," John said, "from a heart attack." "I may as well have been dead, for all anyone cared," Nanny Nan said. "It so happens I was not dead, I fainted." The twins were momentarily stymied. Finally, Abigail said, "Really? You fainted? Do people really faint?" "Of course I fainted. Kidnappers running around, dogs barking, guns going off. What else is there to do but faint?" The professor tried to restore quiet. "Yes, well," he said, "the important thing now is that you are all right." He moved as though to walk into the house, but Nanny Nan did not budge. "No, the important thing is I cannot remain in the employ of people with such an alarming and, if you must know, criminal class of acquaintances." "Acquaintances?" Abigail said. "Those aren't our acquaintances. They're two horrible brothers we had never even met before." "I am a professional nanny," Nanny Nan said with great dignity, "not a professional kidnapping prevention service. You may consider this my resignation, effective immediately. I will send you an invoice for my services up until today. Good day to you all." And with that, Nanny Nan marched past the twins, past the professor, and, with a final glare in her direction, past Cassie. The last everyone saw of her, she was striding down the street. This, I need not tell you, came as both a shock and, in truth, a pleasant surprise to John and Abigail. They did not want Nanny Nan to be dead, and she wasn't, but they weren't crazy about her continuing to act as their nanny, and now she wasn't that either. The twins did not go as far as to literally jump up and down and cry, "Yay!" but they felt something along those lines. Indeed, John and Abigail exchanged a look that said wordlessly, "Yay!" The policeman sat down with the Templetons and took their statements. Professor Templeton and John and Abigail told Officer Timmons about Dean D. Dean, his brother, Dan D. Dean, and everything that had happened. The officer said that the police would keep an eye out for the Dean twins. Then, after Officer Timmons had left and the professor was taking a little rest, the Templeton twins took Cassie for a walk around the block. I don't know if you have ever walked a dog before, but if you have, you may have noticed that walking a dog provides a very good opportunity for a calm discussion with someone, even if that someone happens to be the dog. If the someone is another person, all the better. Now that the wild, dangerous adventure with the Dean brothers had come to an end, the Templeton twins were glad to have a chance to talk the whole thing over. I bet none of this would have happened if we had stayed at Elysian University, John said. Abigail nodded. I still don't understand why we had to leave, she said. While the twins thought about that, Cassie took the opportunity to spot a squirrel in a tree, grow electrified with excitement, scamper over to the tree, bark, and be dragged away by John. Well, Abigail said, Papa said that the people at TikTok Tech were happy to let him use their laboratory in exchange for teaching. I know, John said, but the people at Elysian University were already doing that. He was using their labs and teaching. Abigail agreed. He had been doing that since before we were born. Plus, all the students and professors at Elysian University loved him. He knew everybody, and everybody knew him. Everybody knew us, and Mama too. At the mention of their mother, both twins became silent and slightly sad. It went without saying that, if their mother had still been alive, none of these taxing and frightening events would have happened. In fact, the thought of staying in this new house in which so many upsetting things had happened was not a pleasant one. John said as much, and Abigail agreed. It was only then that the Templeton twins reached a rather intelligent realization. Oh, John said. Yes, Abigail said. That explains it. By then they had returned home. The twins unclipped the leash from Cassie's collar and watched as she sped down the hall to the kitchen and her water bowl, where she lapped and gulped and slurped as though she had just walked across a desert and not around a perfectly nice tree-shaded block. The twins then went to their father's study. The door was open. The professor was at his desk, jotting notes and humming a little song. They knocked. He looked up. Papa, Abigail said, can we ask you something? Professor Templeton put his pen down and said, Of course. As the twins entered the study, he added in a very serious tone, But first I have to tell you something. The twins sat in the matching chairs their father kept on the other side of his desk and wondered what could cause him to sound so grave. Hadn't the worst possible thing in the world already happened a year earlier? I have neglected to do an important thing, Professor Templeton said. I have not told you two how very proud I am of both of you. What you did was absolutely extraordinary. Really? Asked John. Really, the professor replied. Getting away from that horrible man in that terrible basement, finding a way to get him to drive you to where we were in the woods, throwing away those bullets so that nobody could use the gun. It was all quite brilliant. That was Abigail's idea, John said. And tricking that awful Mr. Dean into hovering where all the frisbees would be? That was John's idea, Abigail said. Absolutely superb. It would have been fantastic had an adult thought of such things. The fact that you two did makes it all the more amazing. He sighed. I suppose you got some of that ability from me, but you got most of it from your mother. She was always able to step back from something and see. He gulped and said with some difficulty, Well, she could see things that I couldn't. The twins looked at each other. Finally, John said, That's what we wanted to ask you. That's why we had to move, isn't it? Abigail said. The professor looked down at the papers on his desk, swallowed again, and nodded. It was difficult for him to speak. Then he sighed and sat back. Yes, there were just too many memories back at the old house and at Elysian. I suppose that's why I was afraid to go outside until we got Cassie. Then we went out on those nice walks. I decided I could go back to work. But every place I went, every person I ran into reminded me of your mother. He smiled at them. I'm sorry that it upset your lives so much. That's all right, Papa, Abigail said. It's interesting to move to a new place. That's very understanding of both of you, the professor said. You two are not only lovely children, you are turning into excellent people. The twins could think of nothing to say to this, so they just sat there and felt splendid. Then Professor Templeton cleared his throat and said, Yes, good. So I may as well tell you now, this entire incident and what happened to Nanny Nan, I just don't think I can remain in this house or at this university. It would be full of unpleasant memories, too. Abigail said, You mean we're moving again? Her brother said. Their father nodded. The Templeton twins listened as he explained how he had just come up with a new idea and a new invention, and he had discussed it with people at a new university, and they said they would be delighted if he were to use their laboratories and facilities to develop the new idea and perhaps teach a class or two. And, indeed, that is what came to pass. But will you be so terribly shocked if I suggest that that is another story entirely? And that I have worked quite hard enough in telling you this one? That I deserve a rest and perhaps a snack and some sort of recreational fun, such as going to the movies or attending a play? Will you be terribly put out if I declare that this, finally, is the end? Too bad, because that's exactly the case. This is, you may be sure, the end. Questions for review. Number 1, wasn't this the best book you have ever read? Number 2, true or false? Circle 1. This is the best book I have ever read. Number 3, do you think this is the end? Really?